It began quietly, almost too quietly for anyone to suspect that life was about to tilt sideways for two people who had once shared everything. In the broadcasting world, where noise and excitement fill every corner of the studio, the silence surrounding the latest news felt eerie, almost unsettling. For years, the partnership of Ruth and Eamonn had been one of the great comfort stories of daytime television. They had bantered, laughed, disagreed, made up, and entertained millions with a chemistry that could never be faked. Even after they chose separate paths earlier in the year, that invisible thread between them never really snapped. It simply stretched, soft, fragile, lingering in the air like a half-finished melody. But when unexpected health concerns suddenly pulled Ruth into a whirlwind she never expected to face, that old connection stirred again, fierce and undeniable. Ruth had always been the cool one, the calm one, the one who could deliver live television under pressure without a single hair falling out of place. Even when life tossed curveballs, she handled them with a mix of wit, elegance, and just the right amount of eye rolls to keep everyone grounded. But lately, something had changed. Her close friends noticed the quiet moments when she'd stop mid-sentence, pressing her hand to her temple as if steadying herself. They'd catch her leaning against the kitchen counter, catching her breath after nothing more than climbing the stairs. And though she tried to laugh it all off with excuses, new diet, busy schedule, just getting older, as she would joke, deep down she knew something wasn't right. For weeks she pushed through. She hosted shows, smiled for fans, led meetings, visited her mom, and pretended everything was just fine. Pretending, after all, was a skill she mastered long before she ever stepped into a studio. But pretending has its limits. One evening at home, just as she was making tea, her favorite ritual of peace, her vision blurred. The world tilted. The kettle slipped from her hand and clattered across the counter. She grabbed the edge of the table, breathing hard, waiting for the room to settle. It didn't. That was the moment she finally agreed to go in for tests. And that was the moment everything changed. When the results came back, the doctors spoke calmly, carefully, compassionately, yet every word felt heavier than the last. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was serious. It would require treatment. It would require time. It would require strength, more strength than she'd needed in years. And though she nodded bravely through every explanation, inside she felt a tide rising, fear creeping in, the sudden realization that even the strongest people need someone to lean on. News travels fast in television circles, even when whispered behind closed doors. But when the information reached Eamonn, it didn't just surprise him, it wrecked him. He had been dealing with his own challenges lately, aches that grew harder to ignore, days when the body didn't cooperate, nights where sleep felt like a distant dream. But none of that prepared him for the moment he learned Ruth was facing a difficult health journey of her own. According to those who saw him that day, he didn't speak first. He just sat still, eyes fixed on a point far away, as if trying to understand how the world could shift so suddenly, without warning. And then, like a dam breaking, the emotion poured out, raw, trembling, and unfiltered. He cared for her. He always had. Separation might close chapters, but it doesn't erase history. It doesn't undo years of love, laughter, late-night conversations, inside jokes, shared routines, and the kind of familiarity that grows only when two people truly live life together. And in that moment, none of the past frustrations or complicated differences mattered. All he could think about was her. Her smile, her stubborn strength, her soft laugh, her joy, her fire, her warmth. The woman who had once been his rock now needed support of her own. He wanted to be there. He needed to be there. And so he reached out. The message wasn't dramatic or poetic. He wasn't that kind of man. It wasn't full of big declarations or emotional speeches. Instead, it was simple, honest, and tinged with a sincerity that made Ruth's breath catch when she read it. Whatever you need, anything at all, I'm here. Ruth sat with those words for a long time. The history between them was tender, but tangled. Their separate lives had barely begun to settle, and now the universe had thrown this enormous twist into the mix. But even as she tried to stay composed, she couldn't deny the relief she felt knowing he still cared, that he still thought of her, that even after everything, he hadn't disappeared from her story. Those close to her noticed the way she softened whenever his name came up. They saw the flicker of something warm behind her eyes, a feeling she might never admit, but one that lingered, gentle and familiar. Meanwhile, fans across the country, hearing whispers of her struggles, flooded her socials with messages of love and encouragement. People who had grown up watching her, who felt like she was part of their mornings, sent their hope, their prayers, their well wishes. And though she answered with grace and her usual humor, the truth was simpler. She was overwhelmed, humbled, and secretly terrified. As the days passed, both Ruth and Eamonn found themselves pulled back into an unexpected orbit, not as lovers, not as a married couple, not as co-hosts, but as two people who had once been each other's world and still cared far more than they liked to admit. He offered to drive her to appointments. She teased him that his parking skills still hadn't improved. He brought her groceries. She insisted she could carry her own shopping bags, then let him carry them anyway. He tried to joke lightly to lift her spirits. She rolled her eyes, pretended he wasn't funny, then laughed harder than she meant to. There was something healing in their interactions, something warm enough to soften the fear, something nostalgic enough to make them feel, even for a moment, like life wasn't as complicated as it had become. And as Ruth continued battling her health concerns with the strength she'd been known for all her life, she no longer faced it alone. The more time they shared, quiet afternoons, small conversations, awkward silences that turned into comforting ones, the more they rediscovered pieces of themselves they thought had vanished. Not romance, not yet, but something tender, something hopeful, something neither of them had expected to feel again. And as Ruth stepped deeper into her treatment plan, courage steady in her chest, Eamonn remained close, not smothering, not imposing, just quietly present. The kind of presence that says, "You matter. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The world continued to watch, unsure whether the pair would ever rekindle their love or remain beautifully linked as soul-level companions whose bond had simply evolved. But whichever path they walked, one truth became crystal clear. Some connections never truly end. They bend, shift, stretch, and transform, but they don't disappear. Not when built on years of laughter, not when forged through storms, not when two hearts still beat with echoes of a shared past. And as Ruth faced her journey with bravery, and Eamonn stood by with quiet devotion, their story became something more than a tale of struggle. It became a reminder that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from medicine alone, but from the unexpected return of someone who once held your heart and still holds a piece of it.